Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage your Director General, Simon Walker.
It is a great pleasure to welcome our next guest. I first met Richard Branson 43 years ago, which he certainly won't remember. I was a 16-year-old schoolboy from Cape Town visiting London, and I wanted to go back and start a magazine for young South Africans. I heard about a British magazine called Student, and I went and knocked on a door in Bayswater where it was produced. And the man who answered the door spent 3 hours talking, going through layouts, and showing me how they made it up. That was Richard Branson's first commercial venture. And the fact that he could spend the morning explaining his business to an anonymous teenager from the other side of the world who turned up without any appointment has stayed with me. Let's have a look at this.
Everybody at Virgin love a challenge. I think what Virgin is about is taking on big conglomerates and moving into their territory and seeing if we can shake them up. You know, we've managed to do that in the music business, we've managed to do that in the aviation business, in the mobile phone business, and I think that where the people who work for Virgin get their passion from is being proud of the company they work for, being proud of the difference that Virgin's making.
Concentrating on the area in front of my feet, aren't you?
It's where I feel comfortable.
Getting this uncommon service because we rock.
Screw it, let's do it.
We welcome Britain's most admired business leader, Richard Branson. Richard Branson, we've got quite a lot of young entrepreneurs here. Now, you've been pushing for a startup program for young innovators for some years, and the government's come through with something now. What, from your experiences, should people who are starting up businesses be thinking about their business?
Well, first of all, I think the startup loans idea is great, and it's great the government have taken it on board. And I think instead of just giving people money to go to university and where they're going to end up saddled with debt and hopefully a good education, by giving people startup loans, they can learn on the shop floor, just getting out there and starting businesses and hopefully creating jobs and making Britain great again. So I think it's really exciting. Sorry, your specific question.
What should be in their minds as they start their businesses?
Well, look, you have to stand back and think, what is a business? A business is simply making other people's lives better. And if you have an idea where you think you can make other people's lives better, you have a business. And if you have that idea, then you should just get on and try to get it going. And you may fall flat on your face, and if you do, pick yourself up and try again until you succeed.
I wanted to ask about that because the dividing line between success and failure can be pretty narrow. You've generally been on the right side, although I remember reading about the budgerigars and Christmas trees that didn't quite work. How should businesses approach failure?
Look, I think the positive thing that in 1850 or something, the limited company was introduced in Great Britain. And the whole idea of the limited company was we want people to try. People know the risk they're taking when they're trading with you. If your company fails, you're not personally responsible because people knew the risk they were taking. Pick yourself up again and try again. And if you succeed, if you want to keep your reputation intact, pay off the people from the first company that you didn't succeed on. So I think the best way of learning to run a business is to do it. I mean, you can go to business schools, you can be taught something, you can go to university, you could be taught something, but there's nothing like just getting out there and trying. And don't be overly frightened of failure, because 8 out of 10 people who start businesses do fail, and that's a lot of people. And the good thing I think about Britain now is we don't punish people who fail. We respect the fact that they tried and they started again.
You were dyslexic, you dropped out of school, didn't go to university. Did what some people might have seen as real setbacks actually help you focus on the businesses you set up?
I think what dyslexia did for me was, first of all, it made me realize I was going to be hopeless at conventional education. I was in France this morning, and having spent 7 years learning French, I still couldn't hold a press conference in French. And I still wonder why English schools continue with French rather than Spanish. I mean, and lots of other things about the English education system, which we can talk about some other time. But I think that being dyslexic taught me the importance of finding good people who can do what I'm not capable of doing. It taught me to be a good listener, which a lot of business leaders perhaps aren't great listeners, so it taught me to be a good listener. And it made sure that I got a wonderful team of people around me. And I think I could see some situations clearer perhaps than people who are not dyslexic, and I simplify everything. So, if I'm launching a financial service company, I'm not going to talk about words like bid, offer, spread, because I don't know what the hell they mean, but actually the public don't know what the hell they mean, and actually I expect the financial service industry don't want them to know what they mean. And so, you just speak in a language that the public understand, and I think that's helped Virgin over the years.
You talk a lot about the people you work with. What should people pick in partners and colleagues as opposed to the people they lead? Do they want people who are like them or different skills? What do you think?
Well, I think the most important thing about a team of people is that the people is that they get on well together, that the people who are leading them genuinely care about people, that they look for the best in their people, that they praise, very rarely criticize, and you actually run your company like a real family. I mean, there's too many companies say we are a family, and they're anything but a family. But if you genuinely care about your people, if somebody wants to go home on Fridays and work from home on Fridays because they've got a family at home, let them go home on Fridays. If somebody wants to work part-time, do your best to try to let them work part-time. If somebody wants to job share, try to let them job share. And so just try to treat people in a humane way.
One of the things you say in your latest book is be bold, but don't gamble. What's the difference and how do you define that?
Well, I haven't always obeyed that rule in my life at all. But standing back where I am today, you want to take calculated risks, but you certainly want to protect the downside. So, when we had a very successful record company, we decided to go into the airline business. All my fellow directors thought I was completely mad, and they could all see that all the wealth they'd built up was about to be thrown out of the window. And so what I said to them was, look, I will only go into the airline business if I can persuade Boeing to let us have the right to hand the 747 back at the end of the first year. And in that way, we knew that the worst that was going to happen was we're going to lose a third of the profits of our record company. And Boeing, accepted that. And then on that basis, we had protected against the downside. As it turned out, at the end of the first year, people liked flying on Virgin Atlantic, and we actually ended up getting our second plane and our third plane, and the rest is history. So, but at least we knew that we weren't going to lose everything from the bold step of going into the airline business.
And just the funding, getting the funding for that must have been incredibly difficult.
It was difficult, and then, in fact, the bank that was going to give us the funding, all the dramas of running businesses happened to us over that. But we, in particular, the first test flight with the head of the Civil Aviation Authority sitting on my right as we took off, we had a bird strike, and this jet of flame, 80 feet long, shot straight past the window. And it's not the best way of starting your test flight with a Civil Aviation Authority. As it turned out, he was an absolutely charming pilot who put his arm around, put his hand around my shoulder and said, "These things happen, Richard." And I wasn't sure whether I was more frightened of crashing or more frightened of not getting my license for the next day, but all worked out in the end.
Virgin was a private company. Then you floated on the stock market, but you didn't like that, and you ended up buying the shares back. You said, "I felt nothing but relief." What was the difference?
Well, we go to war for our freedom, and if you are a public company, you do lose a lot of freedom. Virgin is a way of life company. I mean, we've started 300 or 400 companies in 300 or 400 completely different sectors. Read any business book, it will say, stick with your onions, don't stray. And as a public company, you have analysts who specialize in music. You have analysts that specialize in transportation, analysts that specialize in telecommunications, analysts that specialize in transportation. But you don't have any analysts that specialize in a sort of way of life brand. Imagine an analyst who's analyzing Virgin, and suddenly we say we're going to start a spaceship company. Our shares would have, most likely correctly, but anyway, they would have collapsed. So being being a private independent company, anyway with our top company, gives us a lot of freedom to make bold moves.
You actually used the line, "I came to hate the ways of the city." Do you kind of blame big finance and feel it doesn't give entrepreneurs a go?
No, look, I think big finance has an important part to play, and I think for some companies it's right. And if you decide to go public, you've just got to do it. You've got to play the public game. You've got to accept that you're going to be giving up quite a lot of your freedom. You have to bring non-executive directors on board. And you just have to accept that it's going to be a very different way of life than what it was before. But equally, obviously tapping into that, vast amount of resource can propel your company forward. And, there are some, brilliant people in the city. So I'm not, criticizing it. I'm just saying that I think from Virgin's point of view, it just wasn't right for us. And I don't actually think we would have survived if we'd done it. I mean today, I was in Paris, as I said. One of our first businesses were record stores. If we'd stuck with record stores and we hadn't diversified, we wouldn't be in business today. So it is, in my opinion, important if you're going to be in business for a long time to accept that, new technologies can kill the business that you've been in previously, and therefore diversification is there is something to be said for diversification.
You also distinguish between entrepreneurs and managers, and we've got a hall full of people who probably think they're one or the other, and some may think they combine both. What is the difference, and how do you define yourself?
Well, I think, an entrepreneur is somebody who's great at coming up with wonderful ideas, who may be great at getting companies going. It's not necessarily great at running a company on a day-to-day basis. And I would say whether you're an entrepreneur or a manager running a company, very quickly you should try to put yourself out of business by finding somebody better than yourself to run the business or the department on a day-to-day basis. And that then frees you up to think about the bigger picture and take the company or your department forward into new exciting areas. And people cling on too long to the particular position, and a lot of entrepreneurs try to be managers, which they shouldn't be. There's another phrase which we quite like, is an intrapreneur, and that is, a company like Virgin has many entrepreneurs working within the company. And if you have the right environment, you can have a company full of entrepreneurs within your company who don't feel the need to have to go and set up their own company, but they can have the excitement of setting up new ventures within a company like Virgin. They can be rewarded well, and they've got the umbrella of security that a company like Virgin gives them.
You write consistently about how important your family is. How do you preserve work-life balance?
It's incredibly important, and because I think I learnt the art of delegation from a very young age, when my kids went on holiday, I would go on holiday with them. I would work from holiday a bit, but at least I was around the kids right throughout their holiday period, we've ended up, I suspect, seeing my children more than most fathers, being very, very close to them, and yet, we still managed, I think, to build, to do quite a lot, despite a lot of working from home. And in fact, sorry, I also have worked from, what I do is I go in and set up a new company for a very short period, but I'll then go back and work from home. So I've always lived and worked from wherever I've lived.
And it flows from that, the question of physical risk. You've nearly crashed in a balloon. You took off in a flying machine that killed its inventor a week later. What drives you to dance on the razor edge kind of physically as well as in business terms?
I love a challenge. I love to see what I'm capable of personally. I love to push technology forward. If somebody says something's impossible, I love to see if I can prove them wrong and make it possible. And over the years have had a lot of wonderful adventures, which some have ended in strange places. I mean, like trying to cross the Pacific. We were aiming for Los Angeles. We missed Los Angeles by 3,500 miles. This was in a balloon, and we crashed in the Arctic in a snowstorm. Of course, we'd actually brought the right clothes for LA and not for the Arctic. But anyway, they were magnificent adventures. Looking back on it, I certainly wasn't protecting the downside enough. We were rescued by helicopters on 6 different occasions, which is why we sponsored the London Ambulance Helicopter Service for many years. But anyway, I think they enriched my life, and they should, I expect, have taught my children not to do these sorts of things. As it's turned out, we kite surfed across the English Channel last year. We climbed Mont Blanc the year before that. We've done a lot of wonderful adventures together, and I've just tried to make sure that they're not quite as knife edge as the ones I went through.
And of course, a different kind of challenge is you set up the elders to combat real problems. How does that work?
Well, I think about 80% of my time is now spent on setting up not-for-profit ventures, run just like a business, but to tackle various different problems in the world. So we set up the elders with Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Tutu and Kofi Annan a few years ago to work on addressing conflict issues in the world, and they've got together the 12 most respected men and women in the world, and they go into conflict situations and try to bang heads together, and have had some considerable successes in places like Kenya, and in other areas that they're working, like Syria, it's been much tougher. But at least they're out there trying, so organizations like the Elders or the Oceanic Elders that are trying to protect the oceans, or the Carbon War Room, which is trying to find a different way of tackling global warming. We run them just like a business. We find very good chief executives to run them. We set them up. We then very much leave them to get on and run them themselves, and then I move on to a new challenge.
I suppose it's a logical progression that after all these earthly problems, you move to outer space, and we're going to look at a video about Virgin Galactic.
Virgin Galactic, are we going to look at the video, or should we talk first? Anyway, I saw the moon landing and thought, one day I would be able to go to space, and NASA were not really interested in you or I going to space. So, so we thought we'd try to build a spaceship company, and that's what we've done. I think he's waiting for the video to go.
So we've got a potential market in the hall today. How are bookings going?
Well, we've sold nearly 700 tickets, and that's really helped us fund the program to date. I think how many people in the store? How many people here would like to go to space one day?
Hands up.
So I think, that was about 50%. Normally, I would get about 70 or 80%. So obviously, it's a cautious crowd. But no, I think the vast majority of people would love if we can guarantee them a return ticket, and if they could afford it, would love the opportunity to go to space. And I think we're within less than a handful of months of being able to start fulfilling that dream. And then from there, we've got some other very, very exciting things ahead. I mean, our mothership is able to launch satellites into space at a fraction of the price that it's cost in the past. So we can, I think, transform the access to telephony to the 3 billion people who are not getting telephone access or internet access or Wi-Fi access. and some other very, very, very exciting things in that area. And then, you know, our spacecraft, unlike other spaceships, which are all rocket-based from the ground, ours is very much shaped like an aeroplane on purpose, so that, you know, so that we can just build bigger and bigger aeroplanes or spaceship aeroplanes. So one day we can do, you know, London to Australia in a couple of hours, and that's the, you know, that's what the ultimate aim of the spaceship company.
And what's it going to mean for the tourists? I mean, initially, how long are they going to be up there? What are they going to see? Where will they go from?
The initial flights are relatively brief. The whole flight's about 3 hours, and that enables us to keep the price down to a reasonable level, get your bonus this year. and then we'll be doing orbital flights. We're also planning to build a hotel in space, which we're starting to work on. And so we'll, in time, we'll start sending people to the hotel. And Stephen Hawking has been urging us to try to, you know, colonize either Mars or the Moon, so that if anything happens to Earth, there are people still alive who can come back, and, you know, we won't waste evolution and, you know, the wonderful species of man. And I think whether it's in my lifetime or my children's lifetime, that will happen.
Is there going to be a second vehicle? Where will that operate from?
There will be a number of vehicles. Initially, New Mexico have given us a beautiful spaceport, and the operation will be from there. In time, we will build spaceports in Europe and in the Far East and other places. We'll start by this beautiful spaceport that's been built in the middle of the desert in New Mexico.
Did you feel you'd sort of exhausted Earth's excitement?
Look, I'm very lucky. I've just had the most fascinating life. I'm learning all the time. If I ever see that something's not being done as well as I think it could be done, you know, I like to dream, and I try to make dreams become reality. And as I've gone through life, I suppose my dreams have become bigger dreams. As I've realized that you know, the possibilities become ever greater. And you know, up until now, I mean, only 550 people have ever been into space, and you know, since, you know, it's the Russians, Chinese, and Americans put together. We should put that number of people into space in our very first year of operation. And so, you know, I think what I've realized is that, you know, private companies can run things for a fraction of the price that governments can. I think we can do it a lot better than governments can. Governments certainly have their purpose in, you know, in encouraging competition, encouraging, you know, new companies to start up. But in the end, it's up to the private sector to take on these sorts of industries and make them a success.
Richard Branson, thank you very much.
Thank you.